Or does it have to be that symbolic value?
Welcome to the 5th session of the 3rd Undergraduate Conference on Anglo-American Literature. Our first presenter is Cansu Yıldırım. She was born in Izmir in 1991. She started primary school in Turkey and then continued her studies in New York up until high school. During these years, she traveled to Prague, Czech Republic with the Common Youth Project. She is currently a junior at Ege University. She has attended her department's very own undergraduate symposium under the theme of borders. She is currently also in the process of studying psychology as a minor. Her native language is Turkish and her English is advanced. Now she will deliver her paper.
Hello everybody, thanks for being here. I'm one of the 5 presenters that will be presenting the yellow wallpaper, so I'm really sorry about that first of all. So I guess I'll start. Throughout centuries, the culturally nurtured reality of our day, which has been forced upon individuals, has very much complexed one's way of natural thinking and understanding beyond limits. By limits, I refer to this very ultimate reality surrounding us, which is accepted by most individuals without question. For this matter, since the early times, it has been hard for mankind to understand that there are very small realities beyond their limited understanding. Thus, their weakness towards the unknown must not only be understood, but it should also be cleansed from within in order for these unseen, the authentic thoughts to be reached out at. The truth is, the word reality itself is such a broad spectrum that it actually comes in as many forms as there are people around. When thought this way, it can easily be surmised that there can be as many as million realities just floating about and waiting for the right person to simply get a hold of them and become their part of the formation. The part of the person proudly representing their mind in this new form is of their own definition, thus unrestricted by limitations of culture, society, or social construction. It is because the term itself is so rigidly defined and neatly outlined and colonized by most societies that the actual border in it is the fact of one actually living it out and unknowingly becoming part of it. It is in fact a term that easily shifts in meaning. What is ignored by most individuals is that the only marginalized people that have achieved the very cleansing of the ultimate reality out of their thoughts and minds are the ones that are seemingly othered by society, as the insane or the ones that cannot think straight. In his work, The History of Madness, Michel Foucault states, various cultural, intellectual, and economic structures determine how madness is known and experienced within a given society. In this way, society constructs its experience of madness. The history of madness cannot be an account of changing attitudes to a particular disease or a state of being that remains constant. Ultimately, Foucault sees madness as something which is located in a certain cultural space within society. The shape of this space and its effects on the insane depend on the society itself. Madness is therefore essentially constructed and controlled by the intellectual and cultural forces that operate within a specific society. Without a given society, there wouldn't be any theorized culture, and without culture itself, the natural world wouldn't have as much importance as it has today. In accordance, being mad wouldn't have any importance within society either. It would just be something natural and most probably lived by many people in their everyday lives without them being questioned, ignored, or at all restricted. With the help of the psychological explanation towards the matter of the outcast mad ones, it can be easily stated that for most societies, the act of being insane is seen not as the deformation of the body on the outside, but actually as the ultimate outcome of the mind becoming a grotesque figure. Thus, madness becomes something that is not understood as stated in classical terms or as some continuity on the line of culturally nurtured reality. It becomes the actual act of the mind gaining individuality among the defined and outlined understandings of the actions of thought. Madness, therefore, is never actually a state of mind, but the act of the mind's individualism gaining importance in and around the unspoken and the unexplainable abyss. In order for this mysterious abyss to be explained, one needs rationality and the struggle to interpret. The idealist approach to mental content to this day has always been against an ideal of rationality. Consequently, in this form, madness becomes not just the Dionysian to the Apollonian particularity of reason, but beyond. It becomes part of the elusive abyss which individuals rather take part in trying not to understand and acknowledge it. Madness actually is not something that lies outside of reason, leaving reason unaffected at all costs. Madness points out to the perpetual instability of reason, to the abyss of our difficulty in comprehension towards it. It is almost an impossible concept, the effort needed to understand the sane without first reasoning out the naturality of the insane. From the times of our childhood, this concept has actually been put into display before us. We are all, of course, familiar with the story of Alice and her unconscious self slipping into the other world. That's in quotations. The other world known as the world of reverse realities, and one which becomes quite unfamiliar to the sane eye. What most people miss out upon reading this story is that the very hole that Alice goes through, leading straight to the uncanny world of Freud's, is metaphorically her returning to the very nature of things, to the aspects of the unseen and the elusive. Nothing there has been labeled or culturally outlined by society. It is in this new world that she becomes aware of other multiple sane worlds in the nature of the ones being seen on the outside, thus gaining the name Wonderland. The land where, with only thoughts, can it exist before our eyes for us to be able to see and experience it. All it takes is a closer look and reaching out to the very nature of things in order to experience such alternative realities that have long been with us in our very own nature. Swedenborg's terms further give an explanation to this point. He seems to separate individuals into two dualistic parts as the good and the bad. He states that the culturally labeled good man easily acknowledges the act of thinking beyond limits and comes to see his dependence on it. The evil one, though, takes pride in what is more than his and thereby puts himself out of harmony with the hierarchy of creation to ultimately become insane. In short, according to today, it seems that the ones that have the potential to go fully back to their nature and actually think beyond their limits are the ones that gain the outcome of becoming insane in a given society. This form of being, commonly described as an altered, abnormal, divine state of mind or consciousness, has also made its appearance in Charlotte Perkins Gilman's short story, The Yellow Wallpaper. The story starts off with a description of a colonial mansion, a haunted house, where the protagonist is taken away to by her husband in order to cure her from a slight hysterical tendency. The narrator herself never believes she is ill, but is still locked up in a room in the mansion where she is left alone and imprisoned to bed rest. She is not to get up, walk around, or even write. There is something about this room that the narrator does not like at all, and that is the yellow wallpaper, which she describes in her journal as the worst wallpaper she has ever seen. The narrator's unsatisfaction with the wallpaper grows as days pass, and her condition gradually worsens. She eventually recovers after tearing down the wallpaper, her only threshold that is in the way of reaching her conscious self, which has been awaiting beside her the whole time. Her own double, actually, which is used to emphasize the true nature of her own being. Throughout this melodramatic story, contrary elements are used to form a sense of dualism, emphasizing a perfect whole if only equally treated. In other words, this very short story underlines how, like rationality, thinking outside the box is just another similar everyday concept that is in the nature of our beings, but never truly displayed out because of the limited understandings of society. The true elusive thoughts of a person is never accepted by surrounding thoughts, for these natural thoughts are not built up within time and have not become actual victims of society itself. Throughout the story, we share the narrator's developing and changing feelings toward her surroundings as if we were right there beside her the whole time. We sense that the narrator of the story starts to grow apart from her sanity with firstly the decreasing misdirection of her eyes. She either starts seeing her seeming doppelganger in the wallpaper before her, or the woman in the wallpaper is actually there in the real world, standing beside her waiting to start a guide that will lead slowly to her inner self. What is important is the fact of the eye being a symbol of culture and wisdom ever since the emergence of Apollo. What the narrator actually loses with the help of the wallpaper is her sense of understanding and seeing things from the outside. She thus, with the act of starting to hallucinate, actually starts to see the very nature of things, and this is seemingly the main concept of her becoming insane. Also, with jotting down what she sees in the wallpaper is the narrator's way of asserting her autonomy and writing her subjectivity into her true and unconstrained existence. She only uses this loss of seeing the ultimate real in order to voice her rebellious way of culturally defined norms. As imagination is seen a threat to the material world outside throughout the story also, the real is mainly associated with the conscious part of the mind and structured rationally, and the imaginative or the seeing and understanding of the elusive originates primarily in the subconscious and is often characterized as irrational, which of course is an oversimplification, for the acting out and living with the God of the unconscious mind is actually the way route to the natural world of one's simple existence. Another interesting aspect in Gilman's short story is the way she represents the supposedly suitable natural surroundings for a being. Individuals are adapted to a certain environment which implies to be their natural world. Once removed, they seem to do whatever they can to achieve the feeling of home and their nature they once had at hand. Gilman achieves this point with, again, the usage of the narrator's eyes, which reflect the very room she is bound to be suppressed in. Consequently, we see the presentment of the interior as a unit, and this unit's correlation with the mind of the insane is rather puzzling. The interior in general is where an individual lives or works and carries out his or her everyday life, and is therefore closely related to human behavior. In this very room, with nothing else to divert her attention to, the narrator of the story is finally forced to confront the suppressed side of her personality, which brings about her natural human behavior, the ability of seeing and thinking beyond limits and living comfortably in a world nurtured by her very own senses. It is this private area in which her private identity is developed, in contrast to her public one. It is also in the similarly described yellow wallpapered room where the narrator gains a chance to reach out to her true self and for the first time interact with her alter ego, arousing from another surrounding reality that has been long suppressed behind the obviously and the easily seen. This suppressed reality in the story is substituted with the yellow wallpaper. This is the unit where the narrator corrupts her sense of culturally nurtured reality and reaches the freedom of her natural self and thoughts. At this point of the story, most critics argue that the narrator gives up the attempt to record her reality and instead begins to read it. The positive aspect of the situation is, of course, that the narrator now actively questions the reality she is presented with, instead of accepting it without question as she should. Her subconscious has taken over her mind and has demolished her consciousness. She is lost in madness, too far removed from reality to distinguish between her symbolic self standing in front of her and the material. To her, the destruction of the wallpaper is a logical reaction in order to destroy the border lying in front of her freedom of endless awareness. Yet to her sane husband, it only confirms her madness, justifying further repression. What we can make out from the situation is how insanity becomes, within time, the only act available to those doomed to be defined as subhuman by submission to society's norms. Instead of using her insight to face and change reality, with her now ever-renewed strength, the narrator is so terrified by it that she completely retreats into her own world. Quote, "I don't want to go outside, for outside you have to creep on the ground, and everything is green instead of yellow. But here, I cannot lose my way." The once hated prison-like unit, redecorated by bringing out the covered nature into existence, has now become the narrator's actual sanctuary. From this point on, for the narrator, it seems to become that only the mad are sane in an insane world. Furthermore, in the story, the narrator's imagination becomes a threat to the material world, as she has grown to know and become part of, and this leads her to see a product of her imagination, to see herself in the wallpaper. This arousing of a seemingly doppelganger in the story suggests a projection of the narrator's fears into the figure of the uncanny sub-reality. For she has unknowingly gotten used to the nurtured truths the society has put upon her. She cannot break loose in a sudden manner. This slow attempt of her starting to acknowledge the abyss of life is the main cause of the outcome of her becoming insane. The sudden anxiety of thinking of falling into non-being, while slowly riding away from the ultimate reality she is living in, the narrator starts to lose control not only of her own mind, but also her straight thinking. As is acceptable for the story's narrator, for all human beings, the abyss of the terror of one becoming mad and falling into non-being lies on or just beyond the line of every person's world. This is what I believe terrifies individuals the most. In contrast with this case, even death becomes incomparable to the elusive world of the abyss. Our minds can openly and easily generate meanings and images of the concept of death. We can imagine the world around us, and we can identify with almost every living and non-living object. The abyss of madness, though, offers the human eye and thought with absolutely no such possibilities. This abyss is actually the end of all possible worlds and meanings. Can it be put into question, then, whether we all are actually, every second of the day and with everything we do, are unknowingly on the threshold of madness? Perhaps it is a possibility. The abyss is a universal possibility itself. Most individuals just spend their lives in such a stable and sane worldview that they never come anywhere near the hole leading to madness. Because we are all on the threshold and capable of falling into the abyss, the sane worldview can suddenly one day be taken away from us. No one is immune because madness is a possibility of every human life. What should never be forgotten is the fact that madness is a natural human response in a human context, whatever the case of one becoming mad may be. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation, Cansu. And our next presenter is Simge Şirin. She was born in 1994 in Denizli. She studied primary school and Anatolian high school there. She grew up with her parents. She has always been interested in philosophy. She mostly read feminism, queer theory, and certain authors that she found interesting. Since high school, she has been studying English. Now, she has been at Bilkent University for a year in the Department of American Culture and Literature, the place she always wanted to be. Now we will listen to her paper.
Hello everyone. First of all, thank you for being here. I'm going to talk about Michel Foucault and his perspective of madness. Firstly, let me introduce him to you. Michel Foucault was a French philosopher, social theorist, historian of ideas, and literary critic. In his books, he mostly talks about the power which controls life, how manner of power works, and how it is used as a form of social control. He is best known for his analytical studies of social institutions, most notably psychiatry, the human sciences, the prison system, and of course the history of human sexuality. First of all, I'm going to define madness in a perspective of Foucault. What is madness and how is it defined by Foucault? In his book, Madness and Civilization, A History of Insanity in the Age of Reason, Foucault searches for the evolution of the term madness. Through definition, the madness is existence as the representative of the truth. Truth and the existence of mad people are related to each other. Madness is seen as a matter of voicing the realization of identity, whoever you are. Foucault claims that the term has been changed since medieval times. At first, mad people were part of the society, but as time went, and with the Renaissance, the reason was raised to the level of a god, so walls between society and mad people were erected for the first time. He historicized madness in his book, so one cannot define the term precisely. To define the term, one should analyze the situation of mad people historically. So, to comprehend the term, I'm going to present it historically. As Foucault defined the term in two different historic times, I'm going to split the times. The process of madness in history, first of all, Renaissance, the classical age. Entire population of madness, 1/10 of all arrests made in Paris for the hospital general were concerning the insane, demented man, individuals of a wandering mind, and persons that have completely gone mad. But during 14th and 17th centuries, mad people were seen as representatives of the truth. Through art, poetry, novels, literature, mad people had the way of reflecting their wisdom. Especially through the art, they portrayed the distinction between what people are and what they pretend to be. As mad people were the people who enlightened the knowledge that people were not even be able to talk about, they were not discriminated, but rather seen equal to others. With the rising importance of reason, walls were being started to build. Foucault shows in his book how over time the insane have been driven from a realm of empathetic, and somewhat esteemed regard to a place of segregation and isolation. During Renaissance, as Foucault recounts, madness was looked upon and dealt with in a fashion unfamiliar to the members of Western society. For it seems that madness was given a far more passionate place in a society. It was viewed as something that was inherent in human nature and reflected in each individual and furthermore in society as a whole. Madness was indeed very much a part of 15th century life in Europe. Though confinement exists for the mad, they were given the privilege of being confined within the city gates. Thusly, the insane were isolated, yet were not placed out of reach from the community. There was a certain level of interaction that exists here and came from this proximity. Even when it was felt that the care for a particular madman was deemed too strenuous for the city, their annex from the city was dealt with in a rather poetic way. As you can see in that situation, even though mad people were isolated in Renaissance, they did not have a place out of society, but rather they expressed themselves through the arts and mostly poetry. In Renaissance, the between insanity and insane was made. The insane themselves are expelled, but insanity itself is not forcibly expelled from the insane. Rather, the mad are allowed to explore the world as they come what may. As Foucault so eloquently puts it, water adds to the darkness of its own values. It carries off, but it does more. It purifies. Navigation delivers man to the uncertainty of fate, on whether each of us is in the hands of his own destiny. Seeing that mad people were started to be isolated, discriminated in Renaissance, is not the reflection of mad people seen as sick people. They were not seen sick, even though the insane ones who were not able to do something related to art or literature, they were forced into public whippings and the performing of plays for the amusement of an audience. Their purpose was one of entertainment. As Foucault states, here is madness elevated to spectacle above the silence of mental institutions and becoming public scandal for the general delight. Even Renaissance was a good time for the mad people, as madness was not seen as an illness. But when it comes to the modern times, today's perspective of madness starts to shape itself. And second time is modern experiences, modern times. The modern experience began at the end of the 18th century with the creation of places devoted solely to the care of the mad under the supervision of medical doctors, and these new institutions were the product of a blending of two motives. The new goal of curing the mad away from the family, who could not afford the necessary care at home, and the old purpose of confining undesirables for the protection of society. The distinct purposes were soon lost sight of, and the institution came to be seen as the only place where treatment can be administered. Foucault saw this institution cruel and insulting places where mad people are treated harshly. The harsh techniques used for mad people in those days also changed the way psychology was seen in those days. As Foucault states that modern man no longer communicates with the madman. There is no common language, or rather, it no longer exists. The constitution of madness as mental illness at the end of the 18th century bears witness to a rupture in a dialogue, gives the separation as already enacted, and expels from the memory all those imperfect words of no fixed syntax spoken falteringly, in which the exchange between madness and reason was carried out. The language of psychiatry, which is a monologue by reason about madness, could only have come into existence in such a silence. No common language for mad people, and psychiatrists creates anything to talk and solve the problem of mad people. In his book, Foucault sees this situation as one of the problems created in a modern aspect with the civilization of history. As a strong example for the situation, Foucault states that there was an animalism that began in these hospitals. The insane occupants were no longer seen as people after a certain point and were believed to be and treated like animals. Some people slept on hay, were tied with collars to the walls, and fed through the use of troughs. Foucault notes that the rooms for the insane looked more like cages for wild beasts. Those institutions happened during civilization, was not seen as evil or as a sign from beyond. Instead, it is seen as madness. It is the pure madness. History and civilization lead to change behaviors of people towards mad. There are some factors for the rising harsh, cruel situation for mad people. Confinement is the leading one in modern aspect of madness. According to Foucault, confinement causes alienation, represented what was immoral about the 18th century, and those who should have been confined were often let free. He continues to define confinement by emphasizing that confinement was a gross error, an economic mistake. Poverty was to be suppressed by removing and maintaining by charity a poor population. Part of the population was being suppressed, but the wealth was staying constant. Civilization not only affected the history of term madness, but also the perspective of human beings about mad people. As it is more obvious now that the term madness cannot be defined without searching for history which has created the term and still continuing to change it, from all the things that I have written in my paper, I have to say that to change the perspective of human beings about mad people, those whom we see mad, there should be a common language shared by them and society. Also, psychiatrists should be careful while talking to them. They should not be barbaric as they were during Renaissance. Art should be used again as a representative of mad people to reflect what is going on in their minds. Without talking, having conversation, and most importantly, letting them exist, and also have voice in society, mad people's problem of existence and acceptance by others cannot be solved. In the chapter The Great Fear, Foucault uses a sentence. One afternoon, I was there, looking a great deal, speaking bravely, listening as little as I could. When I was accosted by one of the most bizarre persons in this country, he was a mixture of loftiness, baseness, good sense, and unreason. Foucault uses this sentence to show the doubt's confrontation with its major dangers. Doubt is an important element for being mad. He continues his sentence with the example of Descartes. He says that Descartes did not consider himself as a mad person. Even though he keeps saying that, even though he was to acknowledge for a long time to come that all the powers of unreason kept vehicle around his thoughts, but as a philosopher, he resolutely undertaking to doubt. He could not be one of the insane ones. As one can see in the example of Descartes, Foucault sees madness related to sensation of being, such as doubt, melancholia, confinement, agitation, and delirium. So, all in all, with the example of Descartes, madness is not a problem, but rather prejudice created through civilization and history. Even though art is the pure area for mad people in terms of existing as a human, it is not accepted anymore. So, I want to finish my part with the sentence of Foucault. He said that when there is a work of art, there is no madness. So, thanks for listening.
We thank Simge for her paper, and our last presenter is Selin Kavasoğullar. She was born in Izmir in 1990. She studied the primary school in Izmir at Çamlaraltı College and then the high school in Göztepe High School. She has been studying English language and literature at Yaşar University for 4 years. She went to London with Erasmus Student Placement Program in 2012 for 3 months. She is willing to continue with postgraduate studies, and now we will listen to her.
Good afternoon. From the subcategories of teen madness, I have chosen female insanity, and I will try to clarify female insanity throughout the yellow wallpaper by using Michel Foucault's concept of madness. So I will explain how madness is used as a way of creating the social alienation, stigmatization and disclosure of women, and I will try to exemplify how a healthy woman becomes really mad because of social alienation. I also focus on the effects of restrictions and pressures of male dominance system upon woman madness, and I will try to clarify how woman question and female insanity were introduced to the literature as a consequence of these restrictions and pressures. The concept of female insanity can be defined as the consequence of the pressures and restrictions of the society, but other and more correct definition of female insanity can be made by the help of Michel Foucault. As he explains in his book, Madness and Civilization, madness is a concept created by the social system for keeping the so-called insane people from harming the system. That means social madness about fitting the social order more than a pathological problem. In terms of female insanity, it is also a concept that is created by patriarchy for those women who refuse to adjust the restriction of the system. Keeping this in consideration, women who were different from the social woman, keeping this in consideration, women who were different from the ideal woman model were made victims of the concept of social madness. As a punishment for their madness, society made them outcasts. So this social alienation leads them to the state of real madness. Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper is an autobiographical work. In The Yellow Wallpaper, our protagonist is forced to live a life which is prescribed by her psychologist. Everyone, including her husband John, thinks that she should rest because of her mental illness. They are keeping her from writing and expressing herself. Thus, our text is in a form of secret writing, which means that she had no purpose to publish it. All of the text is made up of our narrator's notes on her journal. Gilman indicates that society had no tolerance for women writers in the times when she had written this text. Because of the social codes of Victorian era, the act of writing was seen as a rebellious act. In the text, John forces her to be someone else who is expected to be a good wife and mother. From this point of view, it is important that the main character doesn't have a name. Gilman's way of indicating our protagonist's lost identity and her alienation from society. During summertime, our protagonist's husband and brother bring her to a house for recovery. She describes the house as a colonial mansion, a hereditary estate, and ancestral hall. These are all symbolic adjectives that normally indicate the size, oldness, and the masculine power, but the writer indicates that the condition of woman in the patriarchal system by using these words. In my opinion, the word hereditary is used in order to express the injustice of inheritance law. As in 19th century, women had no rights to get their share from inheritance in any case. Even if they were married, their share was given to their husbands. And the word colonial symbolizes the patriarchy, the colonizer being man and the colonized being woman. Although the word colonial reflects the architectural style, narrators moving into this house is a symbol for her being decolonized and man's domination over her. And the inequality of their marriage and the pressure upon our protagonist is also symbolized by the help of the word colonial. So this symbolically shows that women are alienated from themselves because they are forced to adjust the rules of the colonizer. By the help of the words ancestral and hereditary, our description about the house indicates the feeling of imprisonment of women within the system of patriarchy. The house itself symbolizes the prison of life, which is created by the system. The protagonist both suffers from being woman and being ill. They use her illness, her madness, in order to keep her from writing and expressing herself, and also to make her adjust to the system. When she says, quotation, "Dear John, he loves me dearly and hates to have me sick," it's a verbal irony. He is taking advantage of her illness. For instance, he wouldn't let her go to her cousin by using her illness as an excuse. At another point, she says, "He hardly lets me steer without special direction." This is also a symbol of patriarchy's control over women. In the beginning of the story, Recovery Home, that is far away from any social contact, shows that she suffers from social alienation because this house, which is supposedly good for her health, makes her feel incapable and miserable. Her husband doesn't let her make any decision. For instance, the room which John wants them to stay in is very uncomfortable and inharmonious. She doesn't want to stay there, but John forces her to stay. She says, "I don't like the room a bit." When she describes the room, she says that it was used first as a nursery, then a playroom and a gymnasium, because the windows are barred for little children and there are rings and things in the walls. According to these, the room looks more like an asylum. The room, which is like an asylum, also symbolizes that she is seen as mad, even if she is not pathologically mad. The writer indicates that the husband of our protagonist tries to enchain her mind. She also says he hates to have me write a word, so this is more evidence that her husband tries to control her mind. Her productivity is repressed by her husband. Because of traditional treatments like the rescue, she is prevented from expressing herself. While she is talking about her cure, she talks about her pills as well. She says, "I take phosphates or phosphites, whichever it is." These are actually agricultural drugs which are opposite of each other. While one of these helping the plant grow, the other is killing it. Maybe this is a symbol of that the pill they are giving to her is not helping to recover, but instead making her get worse. She and John have a quarrel about the room when she doesn't want to stay there. Actually, this conflict between John and the protagonist symbolizes the inner conflict of the protagonist. Her desires and wishes are different from the expectations of her husband. She is forced to become a devoted, affectionate, and motherly ideal woman by John, so that it creates an inner conflict. She is in between the desires of herself and the expectations of her husband. Even if she resisted, John makes her stay, and as a result of this, she starts to think that she likes the room. And this is an example of her self-alienation. She forgets her actual wishes, desires, and starts to desublimate them. Then the wallpaper starts to seem different. She sees lots of figure in it. She says, "I never saw so much an expression in an inanimate thing before." This symbolizes the protagonist's repressed productivity. Her repressed feelings come to light throughout the wallpaper. She looks at the paper day and night to see what the pattern is. She says, "I didn't realize for a long time what the thing was that's shown behind the pattern, but I am sure it is a woman." And she realizes that the pattern becomes sparse. These are all symbolic. First, she didn't understand what the pattern is, but then she sees the bars. It symbolizes that she recognizes the patriarchal structure. I assume that what she saw behind the bars in the wallpaper is her alienated self. Her repressed feelings appear to her as a woman in the wallpaper. These are all the consequences of the pressures and the restrictions of male power and society. And also these all symbolizes the double otherness of her. First, her husband puts her in a room with the bars because she should be protected. Then they treat her as a sick and put her under the pressure of recovery, imposing that she is mad. She becomes the other, first because of her sex, then because of her so-called madness. With the help of the image of the woman in the wallpaper, we can understand that our protagonist's destiny has already been determined by patriarchal society. It shows that she was destined to live behind the bars. This is the patriarchal society which decides where women should stand. She doesn't have any rights on her own destiny. She should live a life which was already lived by lots of women. Women don't have any control over their own destiny. Another possible proof for this is that Jenny is also looking at the paper so closely. Even she, John's sister, the protector of patriarchy, knows that there is a pattern in which she is the object. Our protagonist says, "I see the woman behind the bars gets out in daytime." When she saw her at the garden throughout the window, she was creeping along. Unquoted. In one way, maybe she sees her reflection throughout the window, and the other possibility is that the woman behind the bars is a figure which stands for showing the misery of all women in Victorian society. They are all forced to live a life which is already decided for them. And the word creeping is also symbolic that it stressed the desperateness and the misery of all women. And this symbolic woman behind the bars shows the inner state of our protagonist. She is forced to make a choice between her wish and expectations of the system. This pressure, which causes to her self-alienation, leads her into an actual state of mental illness, step by step. Towards the end of the story, she says it was moonlight, and the poor thing began to crawl and shake the pattern. I got up and ran to help her. Actually, she tries to get rid of the pressures of the system, which is symbolized by the bars. She says, I pulled and she shook, I shook and she pulled, and before morning we had peeled off the yards of the paper. It is like a mirror relationship. This symbolizes that she tries to become one with her alienated side by getting rid of the paper. She identifies herself with the woman in the wallpaper. What they peeled off is the depiction of a woman behind the bars, but it symbolizes the structure of the system. Writer indicates that gender roles and the male-dominant society led our protagonist to the state of mental illness. At the end of the story, we see our protagonist lock the door and throw the key out of the window. She refuses to leave the room and ties herself to the wall by a rope. She says, I have got at last, in spite of you and Jane, and I have pulled off most of the paper, so you can't put me back. She refers to herself as the woman in the wallpaper. It symbolizes that she takes over the control and ends her inner conflicts. She becomes one with her repressed side. She can't be forced to become an ideal Victorian model woman anymore. She uses the madness in order to get out of the circle of the reason. She destroys the structure of system by tearing off the paper. But here a question arises. Can a civilized woman survive without the patriarchy? When she tears the paper, she destroys the system. Without the protection of the system, she has no self-trust, because she knows nothing about the outside world. She is like a newborn baby. Creeping is also a symbol for her new beginning, but she is conditioned to this system. She doesn't know a world without this system. Maybe in one way this led her to self-destruction. She can't live without it. When she destroys the structure of the system, she also destroys her identity. Or another possibility is that maybe she found her freedom with the help of this text. She created her own language and structure which helps her to survive. She creates her own identity which is not dictated as angelic or demonic by patriarchy, and she rescues womanhood from the stereotypes which are created by the system itself. As an alternative reading of the end of the yellow wallpaper, I would suggest that the madness of our protagonist is the way of getting rid of the pressures and the restrictions of the system. As Michel Foucault explains in his book, Madness and Civilization, madness turned into a concept which is used by the system in order to produce the stability of state. As in the case of our protagonist, she is not pathologically mad at first, but then the social alienation which our protagonist suffers turns her social madness into a pathological madness. When she is really mad, she takes over the control. Only when she is mad, she is free from the restrictions and the pressures of patriarchy. She breaks her autonomy by going mad and becomes independent. Maybe this is the only way of being free from everything. Only with the help of her madness, she actually resists the patriarchy. In the last scene, this can be seen clearly. When her husband enters the room, he faints, and she creeps over him. This symbolizes her victory over male dominancy. She isn't following the rules of her husband anymore. She creates her own system with her madness. She overthrows patriarchy and takes over the control. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you for your paper, Selin. Do you have any questions or comments? Then this is the end of our program for today. conference. Thank you.